Good day, everyone. My name is Marie Muldowney. I'm the Managing Director at CSI, a Moody's Analytics company. I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar, A Women's Guide to Financial Literacy. Women make up half the population. We are money managers, breadwinners, family matriarchs. We have dreams and ambitions. We are advisors, and we have quite a number of advisors on the call today, and we are people looking for advice. So today's session focuses on the needs and considerations for women in their finances. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. Any ratings, financial reporting analysis, projections, or other observations constituting part of the information contained herein are and must be construed as statements of opinion and not statements of fact or recommendations to purchase, sell, or hold any securities. We ask that no one record this webinar without Moody's explicit written permission. Lastly, no one has permission to quote any of the comments made by the panelists or questions from the webinar audience. All members of the audience are currently on mute. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box at the lower right-hand side of your screen. So I'd like to start, the next slide, to introduce you to John Pappas. He will in turn introduce our panel and host the session and introduce your questions. John is a Senior Director of Business Development and responsible for CSI's B2B strategy. He has been in the financial services industry for 25 years and occupied several roles, including portfolio manager, senior account executive, advisor in private banking, and economist. So without further ado, I'll turn the session over to John.
Thank you very much, Marie. Thanks for the kind introduction. I'd like to welcome all the participants to today's session. It's going to be a very rich dialogue, and I thank you all for joining. The format for today's session will consist of 5 questions. The first 3 questions will be asked individually of all the panelists. When we get to question number 4, it will be an open roundtable based on that question. And then finally, I will ask a question of Marie as we get to the end of the panelist portion of the presentation today. We'll try and save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A for all the participants. Feel free throughout the presentation to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I will do my best to try and organize those questions for the end of the session. Introducing today's panelists from the center of your screen to the right, we have joining us from RBC, Jennifer Vassal, who is a regional manager and investment and retirement planner. We also have Neela White, who is a portfolio manager at Raymond James. And finally, we have Carissa Lucreziano, who joins us from CIBC, and Carissa is Vice President of Financial and Investment Advice. At this point, we'll move on to the first question. Next slide, please. This first question is for Jennifer. Jennifer, why do women need to focus on improving their level of financial literacy?
Thanks very much, John, and a warm welcome to everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here this afternoon and participate in A Women's Guide to Personal Finance. It is incredibly important for women to focus on improving their level of financial literacy. As Marie mentioned at the onset of the presentation, women do represent 50% of the population, and we will or do currently hold 50% or will at some point 50% of the wealth. So incredibly important that we are taking the time to really understand what is available to us, how important it is, and the impact that having that literacy over time can bring to our lives and our future generation as well. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to speak on why financial planning is important for women. As mentioned by John and Marie, my name is Jennifer Vassal. So I wanted to dive into a couple of areas of why financial planning is important for women. So just wanted to start off at the top by saying globally, women generally face different challenges through their financial life journey. compared to men. I wanted to dive into 4 of those key areas this afternoon, being maternity leave and the need for flexible working conditions in some cases, the gender pay gap that exists, longer life expectancy, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a few moments, lower risk tolerance. In some cases, women tend to invest more conservatively than men, and we can understand the impact that that can have over time. And while we have this conversation, I want you to keep tucked in the back of your mind that in Canada, women's share of private wealth is expected to be more than $2.7 trillion by 2024, representing 50% of Canadian wealth. So really, really important topic this afternoon. I thank you very much. Next slide, please, John. So the first part that I wanted to talk about is maternity leaves and need for flexible working conditions. So, women tend to see more discontinuities in their careers than men as a general statement. This could be due to maternity leave or taking care of elderly parents. I have experienced this myself. I'm a mother of twins, and being away from work for 1 year, that certainly does have an impact financially, especially when you suddenly move from making 100% of your salary to 70% of your salary. That is something that is certainly going to have an impact on your overall savings and opportunities for investments over time. We were all impacted by the pandemic recently, but recently women were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And many stepped back from employment to really support children and families due to COVID-19. In many instances, and from many of us, I'm sure, the living rooms, the kitchen became classrooms, the family room may have become an office. We had, in my case, personally, myself, my children, and my husband were home. We were working from home, the children were home. So, and what I also saw is many women in particular made decisions to really reconsider their career choices and how they want to present themselves in the workforce in terms of where their priorities were. I've seen friends who made a decision to move away from certain roles to provide more flexibility for their children and things like that. So a break often means a certain period of time without an income. And this is certainly bound to disrupt regular savings and investments. But what we also need to consider is, what is this impact over time? So, women really need, in particular women as a general statement, need, more of an emergency savings on hand, and really should be financially prepared so that such breaks don't necessarily throw our financial planning off track. Next slide, please, John. So the gender pay gap, really important topic, and I'm sure most of you have heard and are aware that there is a gender pay gap between male and female. As a general statement, again, women with the same qualifications are commonly paid less than men. The pay gap increases even more with seniority, as you would expect that as you rise in seniority in the ranks, that would equalize a little bit more, but not in most cases. The pay gap does continue to be present even as women scale that corporate ladder and enter senior roles. So that is something definitely to keep in mind. Naturally, this often leads to lower savings and lower retirement income. Obviously, if you're making less throughout your working years and as you scale the corporate ladder, as you have obviously expenses and things to be responsible for, there's potentially less left to add to savings and future investment options and retirement funds and things like that. That's just a natural order. Even when women are not taking breaks, this is really important, they often choose to take jobs that will pay them less so that they can maintain better work-life balance, whether it could be aging parents, it could be children, it could be personal reasons. I've seen many friends, family members, step away from well-educated professions and, degrees and things like that, where they have chosen deliberately take on roles that will give them more flexibility to provide better life balance for them and their family. While that is a noble thing and a, important decision that they make, we also have to take into consideration in the moment the longer term effects and the impact that will have on our finances over time. Okay, so this personal decision can lead to lower disposable income, as we spoke about before. And with less disposable income, financial planning assumes larger importance. So, as we go on, and I've been a financial planner for quite some time, worked with many clients, and I lead a financial planning team. So really important that we understand Like, where are we in our decision making right now? But also it is incumbent on us as planners, but also as advisors, to really bring to the forefront and help clients and just people in general understand this is a great decision now, but what will be the longer term impact over time? Next slide, please, John. So longer life expectancy, which is great. Women, have a longer life expectancy than men. We know this. And just a statistic in North America, the average male life expectancy tops out at about 78 years on average. And the female life expectancy tops out at about 85 years on average. So about a 7-year gap there that we expect that the female will typically and traditionally outlive the male. This means that women will live longer years post-retirement. And as we talked about, a few moments before, in some cases, less prepared and with less to really support that time in retirement. As we've seen, women take more career breaks, we have more expenses to manage and things like that. We make financial planning. This really makes financial planning more crucial for women because of that longer time in retirement that we are expected to live, but perhaps not necessarily as prepared as we could be in some cases. Just really make it important that we not just plan for now, but we really think about what are these decisions, how are they going to impact us in the long run as we get further and further into retirement. So, sometimes even working women tend to depend on spouses. And I've seen this a lot when I was a branch manager to manage the family finances. And if the spouse passes away prematurely, they may find it difficult to manage their finances on their own. Financial planning and financial literacy therefore really becomes more important for women. I can share an example. When I was a branch manager, often in some cases you'd see one spouse, unfortunately, unfortunately, they could be the passing away of another spouse that you see the wife present herself often ill-equipped to really understand where they stand financially, where the family stands financially, how her life is going to look and how she can navigate and understand how to be fully prepared as she goes into not just that stage of grieving, but really understanding what will her life look like, not just personally, but financially moving forward. So really making it really important for us as women to continue to stay involved and have a good understanding and really become a little bit more financial literate. I do see the tides turning, over the times, but it is important that we continue to stay involved, stay vigilant, and have a true understanding of our finances, personal finances, but also become continue to educate ourselves and continue to be financial literate as time goes by. Next slide, please. John?
Yeah, I think it's there.
Excellent, thank you. So the last point that I really wanted to talk about is that is one of lower risk tolerance. So, as a general statement, again, women tend to invest more conservatively. Although I do see this changing, women have traditionally put their money in safer assets, assets where perhaps the principal is protected and there isn't, a lot of risk associated with losing much of their capital, or not necessarily going in terms of more of an aggressive investment portfolio. Women are often more risk averse and focus on safety of their capital by nature. And again, where the downside here is that perhaps we're not keeping up with inflation, and our assets or our capital is not necessarily competing with that rate of inflation and really taking on the opportunity to grow more aggressively to support all the things that I talked about in the previous slides. Women are often less exposed to financial products and financial planning, as I talked about, the importance of becoming more financial literate and being involved and educated about finances and why it's important and starting to plan early. There's often a lack of awareness, especially as I mentioned before, if a male partner is managing the family finances, this can put women, certainly at a disadvantage because their wealth does not necessarily grow as fast as it really could or it really should. And that is something that we need to be very, very deliberate about understanding, not just the what, but the how we can also, allow those funds to grow a little bit more aggressive and deliberately for us, So while it is important For everyone, certainly, it is essential for women to diversify based on their risk appetite, allowing their wealth to grow faster and stay ahead of and competitive with the rate of inflation. So in closing, so because women are disproportionately impacted by things that I mentioned, like more time away from work, the gender pay gap, longer life expectancy, and a lower risk tolerance, it is critically important that we pay attention, we focus on financial planning, and be deliberate and consistent about financial planning. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's some excellent information you've shared here. I have a quick follow-up question for you with regards to your own customers. Are you finding that you're often encouraging their individuals to bring their spouse to meetings, whether it's one way or the other? If your customer is male or female, regardless, is that something that you often encourage?
Absolutely, absolutely. We encourage that, we recommend it, and sometimes we insist on it. We truly believe that financial planning has to take place as a family. And often we ask clients to dream about, what does retirement look like for you? What does the next 10, 20, 30 years, what does the next leg of the journey look like for you? And often it's debatable between couples, but it's really important that we bring our spouses with us, not just for the reasons I mentioned, just that we can really get on the same page where finances are concerned. We can understand, risk tolerance, and along the way, even if you're not the individual that's truly passionate about planning and learning about, investments and things like that, you're picking up things along the way. But also you're building a relationship with your advisor. You're building a relationship with your financial planner. And they know you, they understand your dreams and hopes as well as an individual. So not necessarily that you need to be in every single meeting, but we certainly encourage, spouses attend these meetings together. So we do help to educate spouses, couples, families in some cases as time goes by, but also is also critically important for both spouses and the next generation to build that relationship with the financial advisor as well.
That's great. That that makes a lot of sense. One quick little follow on here. There's actually a question from a participant in terms of, do you have any tips for someone who has a partner or a spouse who is completely not engaged in the financial aspects of the family life, but needs to be?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and we face that every day. And you know what? It's something that can happen over time. And we do different things to engage people with different levels of interest. We could start with something like a client event, a seminar, where it's not as threatening to feel that you're one-on-one with a financial planner. Maybe that's not your thing, but maybe it's something that can happen or start in more of a social setting. I know at my organization, we do a lot of WebEx meetings just like this to educate clients on finances, but we do talk about other things other than finance. So it just makes it fun and engaging for everybody. And it's somewhere to start. We do the large events before the pandemic face-to-face. We do the ones now, which is based on WebEx. But I would encourage them to start even with something like this, like an education seminar on finances. And that is also, as I mentioned, critically important just to even go in and start to build that relationship with the financial planner, with the advisor. You'll find we're probably they'll probably find that we're probably a lot more fun than they expect. And that financial planning, that literacy, but also that social and that relationship building is critically important. So just to summarize, if that person really is not that interested in the traditional form of going into an organization and talking about finances and financial planning, I'd probably start with something like this or something like an event where they are talking in general terms about finances, about the economy, or even just about the need for financial planning. That's where I would start.
That's great. Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next slide, please. This question is for Neela. Neela, what is the financial impact of employment, motherhood, retirement, divorce, widowhood, long-term care, and health?
That's quite a mouthful. Thanks very
It
much
is.
for having thanks very much for having me on today. I think just by this very slide alone, we can see that as women, as just all sorts of roles that we engage in, all sorts of hats we wear, and that each aspect of our life does have a financial implication. So next slide, please. We're going to start with employment. So what you might notice is that there's a very common red thread between what Jennifer just discussed and what I'm going to discuss. I think mine might have a little bit more of a bias towards being sandwich generation adults as well as caregiving adults. I was a caregiver for 10 years to both my mom and dad. So I've seen a lot of stuff that caught me by surprise. So that's part of what my presentation is going to be about. So when we look at employment, we know that women tend to earn less than men over their lifetime, which makes them at a differential for accumulating savings, for having benefits. They're also going to have to finance their retirement for a longer period. And usually within that last 5 years, it tends to be with declining health. Caregivers on the whole tend to be female caregivers, and they really need to be cognizant of the impact of leaving their jobs permanently or part-time to care for family or friends. And it seems to fall still more to the female within a family unit. Given that women statistically earn less than their male counterparts, it actually is about 12 years that women take out of their working lives as a barbell to care for their young families, as well as taking care of their aging parents. So we can see that that requires a longer term savings plan and strategy from an earlier age. Key considerations, as Jennifer mentioned, are the loss in wages, the loss in retirement savings, the loss of benefits. And I think a big factor that's often overlooked is the impact on personal health. I think what, maybe one of the slight advantages with what we've just come through with COVID is that it has really highlighted personal health, personal well-being, and mental health. So I think it's become more of a issue that employers are aware of, that everybody's life situation is really quite different. Yearly wages lost by caregivers due to absenteeism, reduced work hours, or leaving the workforce entirely is around 221 million for women and about half that for men. And this is an Ontario number, so a little bit Ontario-centric. In 2018, 85% of what a male was making is what a female was making for a comparable job and comparable education. It would actually take around 39 extra days of working to compensate for that differential. So that's an extra 2 months of being employed just to compensate for the lesser income. One of the interesting things that has come out of the pandemic is about 1/3 of Canadian women were actually considering leaving the workforce due to an elevated amount of domestic stress. So we can see that it had more of an impact than losing your job or reducing your hours, but just the overall stress within a family unit. Next slide, please. A mummy tax. So when I first read about this I'd like to say about 4 or 5 years ago, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked because sociologists actually coined this the motherhood penalty. And what they discovered across developed nations was that in working countries, women with children tended to earn about 14% less than women without children. And the reasons which we all may have experienced, or we have family that have experienced this, is having to take parental leave, refusing the overtime because you have your child's activities to go to, working part-time because you want to be home to help take care of the children and be there for their, return home from school, all of those things, reducing work hourly wages, declining promotions. And the unfortunate part about this is that all of these put together tend to be viewed as having less commitment, less dependability, being less authoritative, which equals less chance at a raise or promotion. So I think one of the things that we're seeing now is the evolution of more flexible workplaces with, how can we effectively off-ramp our careers to have families, and how can we successfully on-ramp once we're returning from parental leave or care leave. Next slide, please. Retirement. This is something we're hearing about quite a bit now, and for two reasons. One, people are either extending their retirement date due to financial situations, or people were forced into retirement as a result of the pandemic. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but there are a couple that I wanted to highlight that were very important and very salient with what we're seeing right now with our aging demographic. 33% of females actually get a second job to cover caregiving costs to their elderly parents. 13% have retired earlier than expected to take care of mom and dad. 12% right off quit their jobs because a mom or dad or a grandma or grandpa received a terminal diagnosis. 8.1 million Canadian people are caregivers, and it saves the public purse $24 to $31 billion a year. So when we look at that type of number and we look at all the things that we do to be able to take care of our young family, to take care of our aging parents, we realize that there really has to be a plan in place, or we have to start thinking about a plan in place earlier on, because certain decisions like retiring early or quitting, because it's a very emotional and it's a very on the spot, on the fly decision, it tends to come without a lot of preparation. And what happens is, as Jennifer mentioned, it solves the problem at onset, but what happens is eventually the person that you're providing care to will pass away. What happens when they do? Where are you? What's your age? And what does your career and reentry into a career look like at that point? Next slide, please. Divorce is an interesting one. Years and years ago, we commonly heard about divorce of younger people and marriages, half of all marriages ending in divorce. What we're seeing right now is that divorce rates are actually on the rise, on the increase for older people, people in fact past 50. For people who have had to take care of a parent or an in-law with a serious chronic illness or a spouse, their divorce rates are 75% higher just because of the emotional stress that it puts on the relationship. In the last 2 years especially, we've seen this term silver divorce, gray divorce, silver and diamond splitters. Believe it or not, these terms have been around since 1984, but we'd never really heard about them until really the last 24 months. The divorce rate of people over the age of 50 is on the rise. Most marriages right now do not make it to their 30th wedding anniversary and last about 14 years. So when we think of the impact of divorce and how we're meeting with our advisors and how we're thinking about finances, one of the things that we really need to do is, yes, focus on the family unit, but as well individually focus on what happens if, what is our plan A if something goes wrong within that unit? Where's our resources coming from? What's our emergency plan? Right now in Canada, with people 50 years and over, 20% is right now the divorce rate, and that is higher than any other cohort right now. The difficulty with divorcing later in life ends up being there's more of an interruption heading towards retirement, and it's less time to actually recover financially from that. So it does have a more significant impact, and it tends to be also as health issues, both with yourself and your family, start to arise. 25% of divorced baby boomers said that caregiving played a major role in their divorce. Women who divorced after the age of 50 were 10 times more likely to still be working full-time until the age of 74 than women who divorced before they turned 30. Some of the reasons that are showing up now for the gray divorce is financial management or mismanagement, just naturally growing apart, especially as children start to leave the home and you become empty nesters, infidelity, varying health and life expectancy rates. What we're seeing now is a lot of people, as they're more mature adults and they're suffering from empty nest syndrome, you start taking a look and saying, is this the way I want to have my next 24, 26, 28 years play out? And also now just the rising of addictions. Next slide, please. Widowhood is it's a very unique time. And when I say unique, what I mean by that is it's a chance to actually flourish with tasks, but it's also a time of discovery where you have to discover what can you do on your own and what you need help for. Women face many different challenges compared to men. They can expect to live about 6 to 8 years longer, so they have to finance a longer period in their retirement with possibly less resources at their disposal, which compromises their care and accessibility to care. So what tends to happen is within a relationship, if the male spouse becomes unwell, what tends to happen is whatever the pool that has been saved, that gets put towards the male to cover care for accessibility issues and stuff like that. What will end up happening is once he passes away, there tends to be a diminished pool for the female who will live longer with her own set of health issues. In Canada, 40% of all women aged 65 and older are widows, and that is ranked #1 on the stress scale index. Of people over the age of 100 years, 85% are women. So when we look at what the aging demographic is, the second highest growing cohort right now is centenarians, of which most are women. Next slide, please. We definitely saw this spotlighted during the pandemic, just long-term care needs in general. But in this case, I'm going to discuss women's long-term care needs. We do tend to outlive men, and that's going to continue for some time. We do have less access to retirement savings as a result of the shorter work careers, so the 12 years that we're taking out of our working lives, and funds can be drained on spousal care. If you reach the age of 65 in 2014, you can expect to live another 24 years. And those 24 years will be, the first section of that will be in good health. And then the last 3 to 5 years tends to be in a bit of a declining health where you will need assistance, whether that is being provided by public care or you're going to have to tap into private savings. In 2005, almost 50% of women aged 75 or older were living alone. That means one income. In 2005, 11% of women 75 and older needed assistance, and this jumps to 20% or more for people aged 85 and older. Next slide, please. Health impact on a female caregiver. I think we can all ascertain that over the pandemic, we've had a lot of time to sit back, reflect, and just see how we're doing with what's currently happening and possibly look ahead on what could still happen as we grow older. We've seen signs of, the feeling of blue, feeling depressed, feeling extra anxious about what's happening in the unknown. And we've seen an increase in mental health challenges. Middle-aged women who care for someone are 6 times more likely to suffer from depression or symptoms of anxiety compared to non-caregivers, and 2 times more if they cared for their parents. 20% said that they lived with stress daily. So imagine what that does with chronic health conditions, which will cause problems later on down the road as they build up. We're more likely to experience social isolation, and it impacts our well-being and leads to higher health costs in the end. We tend to experience higher levels of hostility and happiness, and that's through the stress of being a caregiver, which tends to happen later on in life. 33% of female caregivers are providing care while being unwell themselves. So just as a personal story there, my mom was taking care of my dad who was dying of pancreatic cancer, and she was taking care of him while she was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a double mastectomy. So I saw it firsthand that there's this need for care. There's a healthcare gap for the care to be provided, and it's being filled by family and friends. Female caregivers are twice as likely not to fill a personal prescription due to the cost. 25% of female caregivers caring for someone with dementia had poorer health compared to non-caregivers. So we can certainly see that there's a cumulative impact of caregiving. When it starts to happen later on in life, it tends to have a more significant impact on various aspects of our life. And simply for the fact of, if we're looking at our working years and our accumulation years, they become impinged upon and impacted. So I think having said that and presented the numbers, it's never been as important as it is right now to come up with a financial plan, to talk to those people around you who are closest to you, who are part of that plan, and to just continue the open dialogue so it's not intimidating, and that you've addressed various aspects of your current life and your current role, as well as, you know, take a look around you and what is your mom going through? What is your dad going through? What are your aunts and uncles going through? This is all a very common element to all of us, and I think it should be a very open and candid decision so that we have plans in place that will provide for secure financial security and comfort later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Neela. Some great information there. I have a quick question for you on one of your earlier slides. I was kind of intrigued by the number of people, mostly women, you mentioned, that are reaching the 100-year-old milestone.
Yes.
Do we happen to know, at least generally or statistically, how many people are in that age group?
Yeah. This isn't a current number, so this is slightly dated by about 4 years. Currently, there's just over, I believe, 8,500 centenarians in Canada.
Wow, I did not
Yeah.
expect to hear that. I thought you were going to say 85, not 8,500.
No, 8,500. And something, you know, if anybody hears on social media or sort of started becoming on social media during the pandemic, something I've noticed a lot of are pictures of people celebrating 100+ birthdays, and they're active and they're vibrant. And I think it's just going to show us right now that, you know, there is such a high probability due to modern medicine, we're taking better care of ourselves, that we will live older and we will need care, and that care will come at a cost, whether it's through government programs or through private financing. And I think we have to start saving early for that and recognize that there is an issue.
Well, I'd certainly like to know what that magic formula is.
Well, for saving or living past 100.
Living past 100. That could be interesting. Although the statistics suggest that men are less likely to do so than women.
Yeah.
So yeah, makes sense. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Let's move on to the next slide. So this question is for Carissa. Carissa, when and how should women start planning for a secure financial future?
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me today. And what a loaded question, but a very important one. So I want to start with the why and the opportunity that is surfacing around women and the impact of planning for the future. Now, I know Jennifer gave a stat on how much women will have in their hands in terms of responsibility for investing in wealth transfer for 2024. The stat I have is 2028, that grows to about 3.8 trillion. So it is estimated that by that time, women will be in control of that amount, 3.8 trillion, a huge number. And that's the total personal wealth in Canada. And so we can see just by Jennifer's example, and then this one just a few years later, that women's wealth across the country is growing rapidly. But there's a few trends when it comes to the growth in women's wealth that is quite interesting to lean in on. And I wanted to share a few of those for conversation too at the end. And maybe there's some questions around this. Where is the large transition of wealth to women coming from? Well, first, women today have a greater participation in the workforce. I know Neela spoke in great detail to the challenges of women in terms of what they have to face along their career journey. And she was absolutely on point. And these are the struggles that women still face. However, on the flip side, when you think about the trajectory and the growth, women do have a larger participation in the workforce than years and years ago. They are leading, they are leaders and holders of post-secondary education. They are also, and this was mentioned to some degree from Jennifer and Neela, but they're also very big inheritors of wealth. Women will inherit twice in their lives, once from their parents, typically, and once from their spouse. So, and, as Jennifer and Neela mentioned, women typically outlive their spouse. So it's very important to really have an early plan in place or have those understandings to prepare you for the long term. Lastly, globally in 2021, there are more women in leadership positions across all markets and sectors than ever before, which is super exciting. It's estimated today that women hold about 6% of the CEO positions on the S&P 500. Here's a few examples. CVS Health, Karen Lynch. And again, these are some are US and global companies, but it does speak to the depth and breadth today. General Motors, Mary Barra. And recently, the appointment of Jane Fraser for Citigroup, which is the first woman CEO on Wall Street, pretty impactful. And let's not forget Laurentian Bank of Canada announced Rana Lulin as new CEO. So very, very big progress in terms of women in leadership. We see that many of us are part of some of these forums and take great interest in seeing the growth of women. Also, women's wealth is accelerating from the presence of female entrepreneurs and female-led businesses that are on the rise. And we've seen this through COVID-19 as well. Also through COVID-19, it's really impacted and highlighted women's strength and resilience and awareness to financial well-being and overall financial well-being. And I think to Jennifer's point, and Neela as well, financial well-being is a pretty big concept today. And COVID has taught us a lot and has also brought out the opportunity to really realize and take stock of what's important in life. With all of this optimism around growth of women's wealth and the journey, there is still a gap when it comes to confidence around managing money. According to a CIBC poll that we just recently did, women are less likely to feel confident and knowledgeable about their finances, and investing is one of the biggest opportunities for women. 90% of women will become the primary financial decision maker at some point in their lives, and that's a big number. Statistically speaking, most women are currently or will be managing finances at some point. So preparing today can not only support the opportunity of growing wealth, but prepare you for the confidence to do so. And so the opportunity is now for all women. Engaging with a professional in the industry is so important. Leaning into financial well-being resources like webinars and forums, trying new digital tools like online budget calculators or retirement calculators. And most important though, taking time to reflect on personal ambitions and start planning for the future. So what are some short-term goals that you really want to achieve? What are those longer term goals? Prioritizing them, thinking of them. And it doesn't have to be anything too complicated. It could be either a blank piece of paper and a pen, or just using your smartphone or your computer, just taking time to reflect. So on the next slide, let's talk about the importance of financial well-being for women. With all the recent changes in the world and the economy, it's more important that we support women in strengthening their financial knowledge to make a positive impact towards managing finances, savings, and investing for the future. In general, we know that Canadians that have a financial plan worry less about their finances than those that don't. And we also know that those that work with an advisor are more financially confident. Another recent CIBC poll found that women play a large role in making financial decisions. So you think about a home purchase, a vacation property for the family, a car, savings for a child in terms of education. Women are pretty well involved and sometimes the leading decision maker in some of these big decisions, but only 54% of women feel confident about investing. We hear often from female clients that if they allocated more time to financial education or found it somehow, it would provide them with greater confidence in managing their overall finances. But if you think about some other really great points, you have to think, are women really giving themselves enough credit? There are several areas that women are really seen to have strengths, and some of these are emerging. So let's look at a few of those. Women will often save more. When comparing annual savings rates, women will sock away more for a rainy day and save a higher portion of their paycheck. And we have seen the importance of this aspect over COVID and, some of the challenges of people either temporarily losing work or permanently or changing careers. or just things that have come up over the pandemic, is having an emergency fund is extremely important and an important part of an overall financial plan. So women will save more, will allocate more of that savings from their paycheck. Women typically earn higher returns. Women often perform better than men when it comes to investing, which can have a significant impact over the long term. And this is due to the way women typically approach investing, time in the market. Women tend to also think from a holistic standpoint when it comes to planning. They often think about planning in terms of life ambitions rather than focusing on the performance alone of a specific account. And women also tend to take the long-term approach when it comes to investing. So once women are invested, they will have a slightly more conservative approach with their investments, leaning into a buy and hold strategy when it comes to stocks and not taking quick action during market fluctuations. So next, let's dig a little deeper into some concepts for investing and how to focus on building a financial future. So thinking of some considerations, when you're thinking about kickstarting or reigniting, building a stronger financial future for yourself or your family, whether again you're doing it for the first time or you're just revisiting, here's a couple things to consider. Get a good perspective of your finances, what is going in and what is coming out. No matter what your age is, understanding the inflows and outflows of what makes up your budget is fundamental. Having a good handle on this will enable you to understand where you can reallocate some cash flow to free up savings. Prioritize your goals. As mentioned earlier, the pandemic has really made us sit back and think, but also has really made us understand the more important things in life. But taking time to really plan those out, or at least understanding what is priority, and then putting that plan into action is really important. So as mentioned before, it could be something simple as starting a savings plan, education savings plan for a child, or it could be starting that savings plan to buy that retirement vacation property or cottage. Engaging the right professionals. So there are many professionals that we engage throughout our life, and whether we're buying a home and we engage a lawyer or we need to engage an accountant, a financial advisor is a professional that you need in your corner in order to make your plan come to life. It's very important to, set out your goals, and there's many things you can do on your own in terms of digital tools and resources. But when it comes to really fulfilling that plan and having that in-depth conversation and the solutions available that aligns with your goals, working with a financial advisor really will benefit you in the long term. Setting up a savings or investment plan to help achieve your goals. So once again, going back to that first point on cash flow and understanding what can you really free up, putting that savings plan into place. So whatever that is, weekly, bi-weekly or monthly, setting that up and sticking to that plan is extremely important. And then revisiting your plan regularly to ensure you're on track is also extremely important, because things change, life changes, journey changes, priorities change, and needs and wants also change. So it's very important to revisit that plan at least annually with your advisor. On the next slide, I wanted to share with you a visual to articulate the benefit of setting up a regular savings plan and how starting as early in life as possible could significantly impact savings over the long term. This example shows two individuals, Alana and Reggie. They invest each month in an investment that returned about 5% annually. However, they start at different ages. Alana begins investing $100 each month at the age of 25, and with compound interest, saves $148,000 by the time she is 65. Reggie, on the other hand, begins investing $200 a month at the age of 45 and ends up saving $81,000 by the time he turns 65. So it is never too late to start investing. It's never too late to start planning for your future, but you can see the overall impact on future savings and consideration, and also consideration for larger catch-up contributions to achieve long-term goals. So, thinking about what you can do today, even if it is a smaller amount, will benefit you more than waiting. I want to leave you so when we think about, when is the best time to start, it really is today. And I want to leave you with another example, our last example of the impact of setting up a savings plan early. So something I hear frequently from clients and peers and network is, if I only have a small amount to invest today, whether it's because I have other priorities or things are tied up, is that even enough to start a savings plan? even in this specific chart that you're seeing, small contributions add up over time, especially when you start early. And at most institutions, you can start an automatic savings plan with as little as $25 a month. And in this example, specifically, it's showing, if you invested $100, $150, or $200, so there's 3 different examples per month. It also assumes that you had an initial investment of $2,500, and there's a 6% rate of return compounded annually. But you can clearly see that even at the $100 per month mark and over 30 years, you would have, in the range of that $90,000, $150 a month. With the variables, as I mentioned, you'd be in and around that 125-ish, and $200 per month, you'd be north of 225, 240, in the 240 range. So, when I think about regular investing and starting your investment plan, and specifically for women, the most important thing is just getting started today. You can always stop a regular investment plan if you need to, but you can't go backwards to regain the growth, the compounding on your payments, which all equates to the time in the market. So taking a look at your expenses, where can I free up that $100 a month? It's a personal decision whether, we can all look at some of the subscriptions that we've, maybe taken on over the pandemic we don't need, or maybe that really expensive latte, whatever it is. If we think about some of the stats, and a recent stat that I've seen is that 72% of Canadians dine out several times a month, and 71% order takeout at least several times a week. So thinking about scaling back on some of these things, we want to enjoy life for sure, but where can we scale back? Where can we make smart decisions to make those smarter decisions for our future? And in summary, I would say, John, that for women, the time to start planning is now. We mentioned throughout this conversation, and the panelists as well, we mentioned some stats around the lack of confidence in women, and women being more risk averse when it comes to investing. But we also know that when a woman is confident and feels secure in her financial situation, she will invest for the long term. So with that, John, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Carissa. Some very compelling information there. Thanks for sharing that with us. We're about just about 10 minutes to the hour here. I want to ask a couple of more questions, and then perhaps we can squeeze in some participant questions as well. We'll try and keep this short. If we move to the next slide, I think this question has been largely answered throughout the course of the presentation, but I guess I would ask each of the panelists, is there any additional advice that you would give women on managing their finances? And if you could keep it short, and we can just go around the table here. I guess we can start with Jennifer.
Certainly, John, thank you. And yes, I think a lot of it was covered during the course of the presentation. I was listening to Chris, and the first thing that came to mind was surrounding yourself with the supportive professionals. But the one that I would add to that is really to fall in love with budgeting, and really ensure that that regular savings that Carissa talked about is a part of your budget. And the time frame and the time in the market and the time that you do that consistently over, just falling in love with the budgeting just allows that to become an eventual and consistent habit that is going to deliver the results that Carissa talked about in her presentation over time. So that would be my addition to it, is to really fall in love with budgeting and make sure that that personal savings is a staple in that budget. Thank you.
Makes sense. Neela?
I think what I would recommend is, when you're taking a look at your finances, and let's say you're in a relationship, I think it is really necessary to have regular open discussions about what your short-term and long-term goals are. And I think as a female, it's also important to have your own short-term and long-term goals, just because by this presentation today, we see that we are affected differently because of our different roles. So I think we also need to put that little bit of extra planning into our own personal well-being. That way too, we don't become financially vulnerable if anything happened within the relationship.
Thanks for that, Neela. Carissa, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say 2 things. Number one is ask a lot of questions. Sometimes as women, we feel, when it comes to investing, or it comes to approaching, somebody to help us manage our finances, if we don't have the confidence, we don't have the knowledge, then We don't want to ask silly questions. If that is how you feel, and that's not for everyone feeling like that, but there is a number of us that would feel maybe that intimidation, if you will. It is so important to ask questions. It is so important to lean on your financial professional, your financial advisor, to give you that insight in financial education and that clarity for you to feel confident. And so I would say ask tons and tons of questions and don't feel any way about it. And then I would also say, if you are not in, let's just say that you're not involved in the finances to a degree, maybe you're involved in the day-to-day management of the household and budgeting, let's just say, but maybe not the longer term view of the family planning, whether it comes to RSPs and retirement planning. You don't have to, if it's not something that you want to get into the nitty gritty of, that's okay. But it's very important to have an understanding for all the reasons that we mentioned. Jennifer mentioned something very important about engaging, the spouse and really making sure that the spouse in the relationship with typically is the woman that may not be involved to the degree. Get involved to the degree of which you feel comfortable. Again, ask lots and lots of questions, and just have a good understanding of where your future is. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert. Maybe you don't want to be an expert, and that's okay. But having the information in your back pocket and in your fingertips will make you feel just that much greater.
Great. Thank you very much, Carissa. Back in the days when I was an advisor, I would always try and impart to my customers, pay yourself first. Every month everybody sits down and pays their bills and neglects to pay themselves, i.e. putting money away in savings. So I always encouraged people to pay themselves first before they paid their bills. It was always a good way to get people thinking about saving. I'm sure you would all agree. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to move quickly to Marie here. Marie, I have a question for you, and it's why should you seek advice from a qualified professional?
I think clearly through the presentation, we've seen that there are a lot of elements that are important in the planning of women's finances. And we strongly recommend that a woman seek financial advice from a professional. You think your situation is very unique. It's likely that a professional has seen situations just like yours and can come up with ways in which you should consider your finances. Most people who are working in the financial industry in banks have at least a qualification to be able to deal with investment funds. So they have the investment funds in Canada or the Canadian Securities course. And if you're looking for an advisor, there are people that are able to give you financial planning. That's a personal financial planner. Someone who, if you're very wealthy, can give you more in-depth advice through a certified international wealth manager. There are people who specialize in investment and therefore hold the certified investment manager. And if you're looking for someone in the trust area for your succession plan and your will and that kind of thing, then someone who's a member of the Trust Institute. So there are many professionals out there that can help you out, but do find professional help. That's it for me, John.
Very good. Thank you very much, Maria. I think we've got time maybe for one quick last question here for the panelists. We talked a great deal about the benefits of saving, about investing, and financial planning. One of the things that has come up numerous times, I guess, in the questions here is what role, and if we could keep it short, maybe down to about a minute, what role and how important is it to factor in the insurance component when you're thinking about financial planning? Anybody can jump in.
I'll jump in first. I would say insurance is a very, very important part of financial planning because I think, it's really covering the things that we can't see within a financial plan. Pandemic has taught us that life is full of the unexpected, and, we've all been through or we've heard of things, unexpected things, health crisis happening. So I think insurance at least provides a backstop of protection to help maintain your finances, not erode your capital, and cover against risks. So I think it's something that everyone should consider, especially when they have children and you're starting off a family.
Thanks, Neela. Carissa, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say, as an extension of that, insurance is a very important part in that whole protection planning of your legacy plan and your estate plan. So it's very important to explore how that fits into everything from your wishes and wealth transition. If whether you have property, to Neela's point, children, all of that factor in. So it's really important to really look at what the opportunities are and what fits your specific circumstance.
Thank you, Carissa. Jennifer, any last words on this?
No, absolutely. What I would add to that is I love the word that Neela used is the unexpected, but I would add to that is something that we talked about at the onset and throughout the presentation is using insurance to protect our income. If the pandemic taught us anything, is that anything is possible. And as we talked about, in some cases, women are disproportionately affected by certain things, and income is one of them. And in a lot of cases, women run a single income household, making it extremely important to protect your income in terms of disruption to your ability to earn an income. It's way to protect yourself for the future and your legacy and your generation and your family going forward. So using that insurance to protect your income is extremely important as well, in addition to what the other ladies have mentioned.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're at the top of the hour here, so I'd like to thank all of the panelists for the rich information imparted to all the participants today. I would also like to thank all the participants for staying with us for the whole hour, and we will see you next time. I will pass this over to Marie to close off.
Yes, thank you very much, John. So this concludes our event. We are very thankful for the presentations by Jennifer, Neela, and Carissa. You provided some really great insights and advice. Thank you, John, for managing the session. If you have further questions, please email designations@csi.ca. A replay of this event and the slides will be made available in the coming days, and you'll be sent the link to the video directly by email. So thank you for attending. Have a great day and good luck on your path as you plan out your finances with women for today. Thank you.